Welcome to the College Football Preview Show presented by Yolked. I'm your host, John Serenitas. And speaking of Yolked, I'm joined by a guy who is Yolked, Ryan Barry. Ryan, how are you this evening?
I'm doing pretty well. In my personal life, so that's solid enough. Knock on wood, stays like that. But not too hot in my football teams. So to
It's
put it
been a
like,
tough week for the alma mater, and
yeah,
we're gonna jump right into that. But before we do, I do want to remind you that if you're looking for a safe and effective addition to your workouts, well, that protein product is Yolked. Only 47 calories per pack. It's a safe egg yolk based product that tastes like birthday cake. You can't go wrong. It's effective and it works. And not only does it work for younger athletes, but it also works for people that are just looking to add more protein to their routine. If you're ready to make the change and add a protein product to your workout routine that's safe, effective, tasty, and can lead to results, well, then you need to visit yoke.com today where you can order this great product. All right, Ryan, obviously, the big news of the week in New England college football, specifically Division One college football, was the news yesterday that your alma mater, my alma mater in essence, although I'm a UMass Boston guy, but UMass relieved Don Brown as head football coach. Brown finished his 3-year tenure at UMass with a 6-28 record. When he was hired in 2021, he was hired with a lot of fanfare. There were a lot of people that were excited about his hiring. They felt that this was what UMass needed to take them to the next level and help them eventually get into a conference and be bowl eligible. They managed to get into a conference. However, they didn't sniff bowl eligibility. It's been a tough 2 years for Brown in this program. But ultimately, athletic director Ryan Bamford and the powers that be decided that it was time to make a change. So my question to you is, and I'd like to take this conversation to a couple of places. Obviously, you're known, not only are you a UMass alum, but you're one of the top UMass writers in the area. You're somebody who has inside knowledge, knows the program, understands it. You're passionate about UMass football. You're passionate about UMass athletics. Um, just some initial thoughts on what was surprising news yesterday. I think it took not only the region by surprise, but I think it took the country by surprise as well.
yeah. I mean, I'll start by saying there's just so many people that care, and there's a lot of great accounts out there on Twitter or just fans in general who drive up all the time, and there's a lot of passion around this program. And I think yesterday was one of like a kind of like, are you effing kidding me type deal. Like I got out of a meeting and I checked my phone and I saw that and I rolled my eyes. I just like tossed my phone on the car next in the seat next to me in the car and just was just so pissed. Like there's an old bit from The Simpsons back when The Simpsons was, really humming along where Sideshow Bob continues to step on a rake and it hits him in the face, right? And then he'll take another step and he steps on the rake and hits him in the face again. And that is just kind of emblematic of what the program is. I don't think anyone is totally shocked that he's not here. I don't think anyone is like privy to that. It hasn't gone great. There's been plenty of angry sessions on Twitter Spaces and plenty of accounts calling for accountability, but do you have to do it like this? And that's just what is always so maddening is every single time you're just like, they just do something wrong. Whether it's the hiring of Walt Bell, the hiring of Charlie Molnar, the jumping to the FBS at the wrong time, the going to Gillette, it's just over and over and over. You just step on that rake and it hits you in the face. And then you're like, oh, I probably will hit another one. And then you do again. You bring all this unwanted attention in yourself. For what? To get a 2-week jump on hiring somebody to arguably the worst college football job in the country? That everyone says it, right? The cover 3 guys, Tom Fornelli, everyone that jokes about UMass consistently says it's the worst FBS job in the country. And you're trying to get a jump on who? Who are we competing with Charlotte and FAU, who recently, Kennesaw State even, who just fired their coaches? It's just annoying. It's enough is enough. Like I was saying before we get on here, it's not funny anymore. It's not haha, the lovable losers. We keep doing these silly things. It's like you can't lose how you did Saturday and then do another thing like this. I don't understand it.
Well,
He can
that's
pick
just
who he
it. You would
wants.
have thought Saturday might have bought him some grace. You would have thought
Exactly. Yes.
they went toe to toe with a good Liberty team, lost
Yeah.
by a point at home. Maybe you're not going to go down to Athens and beat Georgia, obviously, but maybe they show up and play competitive against UConn, and a couple of breaks go your way, you beat them. To me, it just made no sense. The timing of it was so like off-putting. Like,
Yeah.
to your point, what are you getting a jump on? Guys aren't lining up for this job right now. Sure, there are going to be guys who want the job because it's an opportunity to be a head coach. They're going to make more money. Programs going into the MAC. It's a Division I FBS head coaching job. So there will be guys who want the job. All that being said, who are you competing against right now? Like you said, FAU, Charlotte, Kennesaw State. I mean, yeah, you're probably going to be in the same pool for the same kind of guys, but I'll say this. I think the UMass football program has more cachet than those programs.
Right.
It's going to be a more appealing job. So for me, I don't understand why you make that move. And I know some people have said, well, this shouldn't matter. I think it does matter. Why the hell do you disrespect a guy who's done so much for your football program, who's a Massachusetts guy, who's a UMass guy? Why do you disrespect him like that by firing him with 2 weeks left in the season? It just makes no sense to me. I don't understand why Bamford would do it. You can't sell me on that it's a good idea, because it's not. It's not like you're going to hire someone next week. I'd be surprised if they did. Unless he had someone in mind that he wanted to push the process along and get him in there ASAP, there's no excuse for handling it the way they did.
Yeah. What I think, again, a lot of this is, how a lot of UMass folks feel is just like, you think back to 2021 and Walt Bell loses a game to, it was either Maine or URI. It was back-to-back weeks of that, right? But one of them was the one where they initially canned him. And there was a point that season where Don, on his bye week at Arizona, came back here and met with Ryan Bamford in private. And there was all these secret negotiations that went on. And basically saved Bamford's job, you could argue back then at that point in time, right? And I just don't get, like, how toxic could it have been? Is there going to be some expose that comes out in 10 years? Oh, it was this, it was that behind the scenes? Probably not. And even if it was like that, the guy still should get 2 more weeks just to close it and finish it out. Someone, whether it was Bamford trying to fire him to save his own job, to get out ahead of, maybe in 2 weeks when Don was done, the chancellor would have fired Bamford, right? So maybe he was trying to get ahead of it. Maybe it was the chancellor now saying, we got to make a move. You got to do it. Or it's just Bamford on his own. Just like, I think it's just time to move on. Let's just get a jump on this, right? There's a number of reasons it could be. And I don't think a lot of UMass fans are sitting here saying we're totally shocked, right? But I think a lot of people were willing to be like, I'll give him one more year in the MAC at worst. But when you have UConn fans, BC fans, all like, man, that's funny, but geez, even I feel bad for you guys. He was owed that much. And the fact that he didn't get that, I think, is wrong. Because like you said, they fought like hell on Saturday and kept coming back. And you would have thought they could have at least finished out at UConn, a team where he used to coach. It could have been somewhat symbolic in a way. He gets to retire, say goodbye to his family in the field, be the last one. And it's just cruel-hearted. It shows just kind of what the sport is, even more so now.
Well, and again, let's be realistic here. With all due respect, it's a bad football job.
Yeah.
They haven't had success. The transition to FBS was botched from the beginning. The foolish idea that they could play their home games at Gillette, thinking that they could do what Pitt and Temple do, that was stupid.
Yeah.
And yes, well, it would have attracted more higher profile programs being willing to come here to play them. It blew up in their face because the alumni base in Eastern Mass never bought into it. You had no student presence at the games because they weren't going to drive from Amherst to Foxborough. It's just, they've just handled the football program the worst possible way you can handle it. And if this is their mea culpa and this is their way of saying, well, we're getting ahead of it, we're recognizing that Coach Brown wasn't the right guy and we need to get the right guy. Well, okay. I mean, you've said that now for a while. You've said it since Charlie Molnar. He wasn't the right guy. Then it's Whipple. Then it's Bell. then it's Brown. It's like, well, you've had 4 head coaches in the last 10 years. Like at some point, you've got to get it right here.
Yeah.
You've got to get it right, because at the end of the day, if you can't figure it out, then go back to FCS. Go back to FCS if you can't figure it out. Now, do I think the move to the MAC helps them figure it out? Yes. You're in a conference. That's always a good thing. It's easier to sell the program. You're going to have guys that want this job. I don't think it's a good job, but you're going to have guys that want the job. And if you do hire the right guy, sure, in the MAC, you have a chance to win 6-7 games, but perhaps compete for a MAC title and be bowl eligible. But at the end of the day, you gave this guy 3 years. Was it that bad that you felt you needed to pull the plug and not give him another year? I thought for sure they would have given him at least a year in the MAC and then possibly made a move. I didn't expect it now. It must have been, I mean, you have to give them a little bit of the benefit of the doubt in there. There must have been some things going on in the background that we're not aware of that might have prompted this decision.
Right. And I think that's just all I'm trying to think is it's like, you're trying to believe that Santa Claus is real in a way, like I'm choosing to try and believe it's something like that, because I can't honestly think that everything that this guy has done for your program, you couldn't have just given him 2 more weeks. And like, it has to have been something like that. And no one is sitting here saying that it was great. I mean, you lost all 5 games to the MAC teams you played this year,
And I hate to tell you, that's not really going to change next year.
No.
No matter who they hire, you're still going to struggle in the MAC. That's how far away you are.
Yeah, and I went on a couple Twitter spaces after some games and have said this point several times that like everyone always wants to bitch and moan about the resources. And I totally agree that there are elements that we are lacking and we are missing. But if you just look at back in the last 13, 12 years, whatever it's been, how many games were this close to changing, right? And if you just flip one play, you do one thing differently, and there's those losses or wins, and we're talking about a completely different program. And that's why, like, it sounds maybe corny, hokey, but sometimes it's like, is it like not just being cursed? Like seriously, what is it? Like the double missed field goals this weekend, the missed extra point. It's just like, why is it always happening here? Is that a coach? Is that because we don't have $5,000 extra dollars for a specific NIL guy or whatever? Like, 'cause sometimes it's like, how are we just missing these things?
I think when people talk about resources, I think they're talking about the facility. I think they're talking about the fact that you're an FBS program. In this day and age, as an FBS program, if you want to compete for kids in the portal, you need the facilities to draw them to your school. Now, the football performance center is nice. It's an upgrade. McGuirk Stadium is still a dump. Okay. I mean, you have porta potties outside the stadium. Like, that's not going to cut it. I'm sorry. You need to renovate the stadium. You need to put money into it. You need to build an indoor. So you can't have the giant red and white bubble that some kid can walk by with a needle and pop and then put an end to it. So, right, yeah. I mean, I think at the end of the day, that's what people are talking about. You made the move to FBS, but you didn't have enough foresight to realize that 10, 15, 20 years down the road, we're going to need to have the facilities in place if we want football to generate the kind of revenue that we're hoping it can generate. Now you're in the MAC. You're going to be playing in some of these Tuesday, Wednesday night MACtion games that are going on tonight and tomorrow night. Well, if you want to play in those games and you want a national audience, well, McGuirk's not it. I don't know how the hell they convinced Missouri to come here. Can you imagine what their thought process was when they walked into that visiting locker room? They must have been like, what the? I mean, I do think that stuff matters. They have to make more of a commitment. End of story. And I'm sorry, and I will say this to the UMass fan base. Let go of the hockey title. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. I'm sorry. Let it go. You care, and that's fine. You can care. You're all entitled to care. But at the end of the day, no one outside of Amherst cares. They just don't, because college hockey doesn't move the needle. It's not an impact sport. It might be in the Northeast. It might be in Minnesota, maybe a couple of other parts of the country. But at the end of the day, nobody cares. What moves the needle is football and basketball. And if you're not good at those two sports, your athletic department is not going to generate the revenue that it should. So at the end of the day, yeah, I think whoever they hire next, they got to make a financial commitment not only to him and his staff, but to the facilities as well.
Yeah, and again, we've got a lot of great New England college football to get to, so I do want to be mindful of that because I could rant about this for ages. That being said, I don't know where you go from here. I think about someone like, just using an example, right? Like Ricky Santos at UNH. I think he's a great coach, right? I was looking up salaries today, right? I think he's somewhere around 275, 300,000, right? Which is obviously great. And say UMass comes along, offers you 850, 900. That's obviously a huge jump. That's potentially life-changing money for you and your family. But if you're someone with a promising career like him, isn't it worth maybe just passing, right? Like that's what I worry so much about who this next person is, about like there may be someone who can be that revolutionary person and change things around. But at the same time, you're just like, look at how many careers this job has killed, right? For assistants and head coaches. And you're like, why don't I just wait, right? What if he has another good year at UNH and then, I don't know, Coastal Carolina comes calling and says, hey, you want to come down here? And, like that's a much better job than here. So I just worry about the person that you're going to get who's going to be probably passing and maybe waiting. And again, there's so much more to say. And it's a bummer. I feel for Don and his family and everything they've given to Amherst to kind of go out like that. Again, plenty of decisions on the field led to this. We cannot forget that amongst all this, but there just wasn't necessarily a need to, right? One of which on the field being on Saturday, using dual quarterbacks the entire game, which worked in the first half, stopped working in the second half, and they never let a Matt Hassan throw the ball, which doesn't make sense because he has a hell of an arm and looked pretty great last year, so I don't know why he only used him in that role. But that's a microcosm, again, of just times you're like, well, I don't know about that one, Don. Maybe we could have done some things a little bit differently. But, hey, I'm not a coach. I'm not on the field, so I'm not going to judge too much. But it just sucks we're here again, John. I just wish that, we've been doing this for 2 years now. I just wish we could talk about better things when it comes to this program, and we just continue to not be able to. So,
all right, Saran 56. I know you was a big UMass guy on X. Says, no, you don't. Kids will take NIL money over a nicer facility. Such a bad take. Who said that they're not going to take the NIL money, dude? What are you talking about? I never said that they weren't going to take NIL money, but the facilities matter because I got news for you, dude. You got to draw them to your program and then show them the money. At the end of the day, they do care about facilities. That's why all of these schools have invested in facilities and their social media teams and all this other stuff, because that's part of the drawing them to your school process. Yes, they're going to take the money. We all agree with that. I agree with you. Yes, if the NIL money is there, that's going to matter to them. They're going to want to know how much you're going to pay them. And they're going to want to know how much you're going to pay them to stay after year one. We get it. That's the landscape today. Now, I don't know where UMass's NIL initiative is. I know they've got good people involved with it, and I'm hoping that it's generating the kind of revenue that they're going to need to be successful as a program. But I got news for all these UMass fans out there who compare themselves to UConn. You know why UConn is 7-3? You can question their schedule and the 6 straight home games and whatever else you want. At the end of the day, they have a legit NIL initiative. At the end of the day, they have legitimate facilities. You go down to UConn, UMass has nothing that resembles the Burton football family building facility. Not even close. Okay, McGuirk is not the rent. So there's no comparison there. And, oh, by the way, they have a ton of money coming in through their hoops programs. So their NIL is really strong, and they've been able to use it to upgrade their roster. UMass can do the same thing. And I'm sure that if you offer enough guys enough money, they will come. But you do need to upgrade the facilities. Let's not sit here and say stupid things that the facilities don't matter. They do matter, okay? They do matter not just for the kids, but they matter because it raises the profile of your program. But yes, we agree. NIL money does matter to the kids, and if the money's right, they'll come here. Thanks for checking in, brother. Appreciate it. And always appreciate your feedback and comments on X as well. Barry, final thoughts here before we move on to talking about the other programs in the region, because we can literally do an entire show on this.
Yeah. Shout out again for commenting, Terceran 56, a fellow Azorian, I presume. And I will just say real quick, I did care about the Hockey National Championship, but I get what you mean by I'm in my bubble of why we care.
As you should, man.
The best sporting moment of my life. I was there with my dad. Anyway, but that all being said, it sucks. I feel like I'm in a rock and a hard place where like I want to cancel my season ticket. I don't want to support the program, and I feel like a lot of people feel that. But like I think about the kids on this team and what they have to go through the next 2 weeks, and not be able to play for their coach that brought them in, and the amount of players that tweeted and posted about how much they love them. You do not see that, right? So I'm wondering if these kids are going to come out and play like hell in these last 2 weeks for them. But I also wouldn't blame them if they wanted to make a business decision if they're thinking about transferring, right? So I think that's just what sucks. And I do think about the incoming coach and how, as much as I want to check out, like it's going to suck for that guy. And I want to try and be there to support and hope they do well. So I'm just tired of the administration of this state putting this program in this situation. It's not just about the field, it's about everything behind it. And I don't know what's going to be done. I don't know how many times you can email your state rep or Marty Meehan to fix it. And because Massachusetts has a hell of a lot more problems than our football program. I always say that, right? But there are little tweaks you could do to make it a little bit better at the end of the day.
Unfortunately, some of those problems are self-inflicted with stupid laws and politics. So
it also would be nice if we had some more, people in the Commonwealth and state legislature who actually went to our state schools. That'd be really nice.
That would help.
So.
And when I said what I said about the hockey national title,
I'm just teasing. Yeah.
No, you're right. Of course, it means something to the alumni and the school, as it should. All I'm saying is I keep hearing about that when people compare UMass to other schools, and I'm like, okay, well, UConn has gone back-to-back in men's basketball. Yeah, they're talking about it still, but it's not like you talk to UConn folks, they're on to this year, and they're excited about football, and you know what I mean? So I don't think that that's going to be some kind of a selling point. And I think at the end of the day, my bigger point is that football, basketball, they drive the revenue wagon in college athletics. And you want to be good if you have both sports. Those are the two sports you want to be good at. And, again, you hope they hire the right guy and that guy is able to come in and have success and get the program going. Again, like I said, it certainly helps if they're going into the MAC. Obviously, we talked about the loss to Liberty, 35-34. Tough loss in what turned out to be Don Brown's final game, but a lot of positives to take out of it. Unfortunately, I don't think they're going to translate to this week, but you hope if guys don't transfer out, they stay healthy, you hope you have a shot at beating UConn in the season finale.
Yeah, it was a tough game. I mean, I feel like so many fans probably can relate to this point too, where like they could have been up 35-0 and I'd still be like, okay, but like, when's the shoe going to drop? Right. And when they were up 20-7, I was like, like when's it going to drop? This is a lot of fun. I'm having a blast. Right. But like, it was a tough end, but huge shout out to AJ Hairston for that final drive to put them in position to try and have the game winner. I really feel for Jacob Lurie. That kid probably feels like this is his fault. I really hope he doesn't. A lot of his teammates came out in support of him. He's been very solid this year. We've always had issues with kicking. So I feel for him. I mean, the extra point is tough, but the wind was really whipping that day on both sides of the field. But it's a close game against a very good team. And it was a fun game overall. I had somewhere to be at 7, so I was kind of sweating out overtime. And I was like, man, I really hope they wrap this up here. But yeah, it's just another, at least they didn't get blown out. I thought that was going to be like 52-20. So at least there was that.
No, they played very well. And I think if nothing else, it was Don Brown's final game. And for him, he could look back on that at least and say, hey, a 6-2 team came in here and I got my team to play hard and go toe-to-toe with them. Boston College, of course, losing to SMU 38-28 on Saturday in Dallas. In a game that they could have won, played really well. They were able to keep pace with the Mustangs. SMU pulled away late to get the 38-28 win. That drops the Eagles to 5-5 on the season. They got 2 games left. They host North Carolina on Saturday at the Heights. Our Kevin Stone, of course, as always, is going to be there for that one. And then they wrap up the season Thanksgiving weekend, next weekend, with Pitt coming to town. And look, bottom line is this. You got to win one to become bowl eligible. They need at minimum to go 6-6. North Carolina's been playing better of late. They can run the football. Not going to be an easy game. Mac Brown, good coach. They're well coached. Of course, Pitt has fallen off a bit in recent weeks, but they just went toe-to-toe with Clemson. These are going to be 2 tough games for them to win. Is this a disappointing season for BC? I mean, at 5-5, remember now, 6-7 weeks ago, the BC faithful were saying that Bill O'Brien is, quote, building a monster. They've come back to earth a little bit since then. Of course, they had the quarterback change with Castellanos transferring out. Grayson James did a pretty good job, I thought, the other day. Now the quarterback. But based on how this season has played out, is it a disappointment?
I think if you're an Eagles fan, probably I just think you've seen this for the last since honestly Matt Ryan. You see this basically every season, right? You see 5-7, 6-6, right? And this is just kind of where it is. The only thing that you can maybe take solace in, despite the beginning of the season start, is it's like, okay, at least we didn't go 3-9 or 4-8 in Bill O'Brien's first year. There were sparks, there were flashes. They've been doing very well on the recruiting trail. And even you take away the Castellanos situation, which really kind of was almost inevitable when you look at the scheme and where things have gone. I think you need to try and just remember, like, hey, this is what it's been every year, but if this is O'Brien's baseline for his first year, I think it can maybe only get better. So I wouldn't call it a failure. I think it's important to remember that obviously it's big to beat a team like Michigan State, but they're 4-6 right now. That was who they were always going to be in the Big Ten. It's just their name is bigger than what that team was. And I think that really inflated things in that start as well. And now Florida State's not great, right? So I don't think it's a failure. I think
worst season in program history.
Yeah, I think it's
those
fun.
2 wins don't look like anything anymore.
No, there really is no good win. I mean, the best win probably is Syracuse, and who's having a good season with Kyle McCord. Right?
I would agree.
So, I think I would just urge them caution. Not like you should look at others in your state of how things are going, but I would just look at it and be like, hey, if this is his baseline, it can only go up. Just try and think positive, because there are a lot of positives this year.
Yep. No, I agree. And of course, the Eagles, as I mentioned, host North Carolina this week. We'll preview that game here in a few minutes. Going over to the CAA, what can you say about this URI football team? It was a heartbreaker last week at Delaware. Essentially cost them the CAA. They could still get a piece of it this weekend with a win and some help. But down 17-0 at the half to Albany. They rallied back to win 20-17 on Saturday. And again, you can't say enough about the job that Jim Fleming and his staff have done. But you can't say enough about this team. I mean, these kids have not only bought in, but they believe, of course, they win their 9th game of the season. That ties that's their most wins, I should say, since 1985. The last time they also made the college football playoffs. Big game on Saturday. Of course, they travel to Smithfield to take on the Bryant Bulldogs. I'll be there for that one. But again, you can't say enough about this URI team and the resiliency that they've shown this season, and all of these come from behind wins.
It's really funny. In the midst of the game on Saturday, I tweeted out how many teams in New England were down. I was like, man, it's looking like a rough week for New England college football. And because I looked, Harvard's losing, URI and UNH, and then all these teams come back. So I think that I'm just the good luck charm for everybody else, as long as I commiserate my own
except
team.
UMass.
Yeah, right. Except them, right? It's dispersed, right? But
except the alma mater.
Yeah, but I'm absolutely over the moon for them. I mean, Malik Grant, right? We talk about how the quarterback play and wide receivers have been solid for the Rams, but to finally kind of have that guy with 3 touchdowns, 100 yards, like that's what they've been missing. And it was impressive as hell. And again, how many times have we seen them drop this game, right? But they just continue to win.
They're not that team this year. They're just not. They've graduated to now being a team that I think in the CAA, they're going to recruit well. Jim Fleming and his staff have always recruited well. They've also done really well in the portal. This is a program that's going to stay in the mix now. They needed this over-the-hump year to consistently be this. I think that they're going to be in the mix now to be this every year. UNH is still in the playoff hunt. They picked up a big 31-30 win over Stony Brook, a Stony Brook team that under Billy Kosh, guy that I think should be on UMass's radar, by the way. He's done a hell of a job at Stony Brook.
Yeah.
A Stony Brook team that has really turned things around. Big win for UNH, improved to 7-4. This keeps them in the at-large playoff hunt. They need to beat Maine this week to have a shot. Of course, they're playing the Black Bears in Orono this week for the Bryce Cowell Musket. But nonetheless, this is a big win for this program. And UNH quietly the last 3 weeks has played some pretty good football.
Yeah, I mean, what can you say about this defense in that second half, shutting them down? And it was pretty surprising. Again, no matter how great the Seawolves have been, but just to see kind of out of hand the game got, right, in kind of that second and third quarter. But Seth Morgan, again, just out there slinging it. And, really struggling with the ball still to run it. Denzel Gibson, 64 yards and a touchdown is pretty solid for the Wildcats. But, Caleb Burke, Logan Tomlinson, I think that they have one of the deepest, kind of like receiver rooms, especially in the CAA, let alone New England. So really happy for him. And it sets up an amazing matchup this weekend, right? It's been a very long time since the Bryce Carl Mustard has meant more than just being a rivalry game, with how many implications this are for main season and then obviously for UNH to try and get in as an at-large.
Yeah, and there's a ton of implications in this game because UNH, obviously, as you just mentioned, wants to make the playoffs as an at-large participant. 8 wins usually does the trick. It also depends on your conference. There have been 8-win teams in the past that haven't gotten in, but Maine is coming off a 31-25 loss to Elon that drops them to 5-6. Not only do they want to win this game to reclaim the Bryce Cowell musket, but the other thing is a win in this game gets them to 500 at 6-6, and that's a huge, huge step forward for Jordan Stevens and his staff as they try to bring Maine football back. To your point, this is a huge game, a lot at stake here. It's going to be a fun one, and always is. These two always play great games. It's not a surprise. This one should be no different. I think it's going to be a fantastic matchup. And in many ways, when you look at this matchup on paper, it could go either way.
Yeah, and
we're going to preview it in a minute, but I'm just
for sure. I feel for the Black Bears. I was worried about going down to Elon. They still struggle against the run, but they hung in this game, right? Carter Peavy I think looked pretty solid, and Montego Moss
had a big game the past month.
Yeah,
more really. I mean, he's been terrific for them all season.
Right. Yeah. So it's a tough loss because it's not like Elon is kind of a world ender this season. This
fighting
is
Musks.
Right. Yeah. This is kind of one of those that if you're a Black Bear fan,
they're the Phoenix, by the way. I mean, I know I made a stupid joke, but they're the
Phoenix. I'm sorry. I thought you said that they have tusks, and I was like, oh, that's
no. They're the fighting Musks. I said.
My bad. Oh, okay.
Musks. Yeah, little Tesla joke there.
Right. So yeah, I don't know. I think that it's kind of like a URI of yesteryear loss, right? You drop a game, you think that you're building up to win, right? But we'll see how things fare this weekend in a second. Yeah.
Yes, he's now co-head of the Doggy. Is that what they're calling it?
I'm not sure. Yeah. I don't know if it's Dodgy, Doggy,
the Dodgy, the Doogie, whatever.
Yeah, Dodge. Yeah,
the Dougie. Yeah, the Dutchie. That's the Dutchie.
Yeah.
Little. It's a family show. We shouldn't be talking about passing Dutchies.
Yeah.
Finally, Brian loses to William and Mary 27-12. Good effort. William and Mary, good football team, led by former Boston College defensive line coach Mike London. But Brian hung in there, played tough. Of course, they return home to wrap up the season on Saturday in the Ocean State rivalry game against URI, heading over to the Ivy League. It's another great weekend of Ivy League action. Harvard is in the driver's seat to win the Ivy League. All they got to do is to win it outright is win the rivalry game on Saturday against Yale. Easier said than done. Yale's had their number of late. I think the most, and by the way, the Crimson beat Penn last week, 31-28. But I think the most surprising score of the weekend to me was Cornell beating Dartmouth 39-22. I mean, disappointing loss for Sam McCorkle's team. This team has been playing well all year. They've had a formula, run the ball, Hugh Jones, opportunistic in the passing game, play good defense, you win games. Fell behind early, had to go away from that formula. But this is a tough loss because now at best, they got to beat Brown, which they can, and then they got to hope that Yale beats Harvard so that they can get a piece of the Ivy League pie. But as it stands now, Harvard, as I mentioned, they're in the driver's seat. They win, and it's all theirs.
Yeah, it's funny when you think about a team that's 7-2 and how unbelievable they have, and it's almost a somewhat disappointing finish, right? Considering that they just, they weren't able to beat Harvard, and then they kind of lose this game, and for how inconsistent that Cornell's been, especially when you force so many turnovers, right? You took 3 interceptions off of Jamison Wang, who's one of the better quarterbacks in the Ivy. So it was still like a decent game. They really struggled to run the ball, but they'll be scoreboard watching this weekend.
Yeah, for sure. And as I mentioned, Yale, who's coming off a big 42-28 win over Princeton, has had their number in recent years. So Dartmouth can still win a piece of this. They got to beat Brown, who lost a tough one to Columbia at home in their final home game, 21-12. Tough year for the Bears, man. 3-6 coming off a 5-5 season. Talking to people around the program, I think they thought things were going to be better. And unfortunately, it never really materialized. They never really were able to put it together after that Harvard win. And that was my fear. You finally beat one of the power programs in the league, specifically the power program, if you really think about it. But they were never able to use that as a springboard to have the kind of year that they wanted to have. And, look, James Perry's had big wins there. Obviously beat Harvard, beat Princeton. But it's really – I think if you're a Brown Bears fan, this has to be a disappointing season because with what they had coming back, they should have been better than 3-6.
Yeah, I just think they never found their groove running the ball. It was –
I think that's a great point. Their running game, which has been a staple, just wasn't as good this year.
Yeah, just too over-reliant on Jake Wilcox. And I know that I drank the Kool-Aid all season after that Harvard win. I think if I look back at my picks, I just kept picking Brown to finally turn it around. So really disappointing, and maybe they can make some noise this weekend and try and go out and play spoiler for Dartmouth. Otherwise, it's just, you got to hope that you bring in some good recruits this year because I think they're going to be losing some guys.
Yeah, and of course, taking a look at the FCS independent ranks, Sacred Heart won the inaugural. I mean, can we call it that? Because it actually was a conference once upon a time. They won the inaugural Yankee Conference Championship, beating Merrimack in pretty impressive fashion, 31-20. This was a surprising score to me. I know we both picked Merrimack, but the Sacred Heart offense has been inconsistent all year long. They find their groove against a Merrimack team that had been playing some pretty good football. Defense had been playing well for them. The offense settled in with Aiden Pereira at quarterback. But give Mark Knopfrey and his program a lot of credit. They got on that bus. They got to Andover. They played their best game of the season, and they win the inaugural Yankee Conference Championship. Of course, they're done. That was their season finale. Great finish for the Pioneers. They finished 500, but they're able now to have some momentum going into recruiting in the spring.
Yeah, this is all season. I feel like I was picking against the Pios because I didn't really know, especially coming into this year.
By the way, I do want to apologize. They finished 5-6. They didn't finish 500. My bad.
Oh yeah, no. So which is way better than I think you and I both took on the over/under at the beginning of the season for their.
I think that's a fine season for them, especially capping it off this way because they've had a tough 2-year run here. Then you look at all the guys that left the program after last year; they all went to URI. It seems with Carson Primrose and Malik Grant. Arsheen Giles originally committed to URI, then he ended up at UMass. But again, this speaks to the job Knopfrey and his staff have done. Jalen Madison steps up, rushes for 170 yards. They didn't skip a beat. Their running game was still pretty good.
Yeah, I just when you flip over to Merrimack, they had a pretty tough decent start to the season, and they really just kind of fell off. I don't know if it's injuries or what have you, but I think there's still plenty of talent on this side for Mike Giannetti. I think that this is a solid first year for him, like overall when you look at it from a 1,000-foot view, but definitely kind of frustrating if you're a Warriors fan considering where you were to start.
Yeah, and of course they wrap up the season on the road, taking on Fordham this weekend. They're currently 4-6. So, yeah, I mean, obviously if you're Merrimack, especially given the success Dan Kern had there in recent years, you want to be better. But I think at the end of the day, you know what? It's year one of a new head coach, even though it's a guy that the players are familiar with, the administration's familiar with. It's still his first year on the job. There's always going to be some growing pains. But nonetheless, they played a really tough schedule too, man. We talk about who played tough schedules in the area. You can make an argument that Merrimack played the toughest schedule. I mean, you played at Air Force, at UConn. You played Maine at home. You played Dartmouth at home. That's a pretty tough slate. So kudos to them for recognizing that you need to play in those games in order to build your national profile. Of course, in the Patriot League, Holy Cross picks up a big shootout win, 40-38 over Bucknell, which means they can still earn a piece of the Patriot League pie. They are currently 5-6. They travel down to Georgetown this weekend for their season finale. They win. Lehigh loses. I believe they get a share of the Patriot League, but I don't think they get the playoff bid because Lehigh is 7-3. So even if they lose, they'll still have a better record.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird ending. They'll definitely be checking in on that.
We'll have to clarify that. Stone and I talked about that, and that doesn't make any sense to me. But in any event.
Well, looking at the standings here, looks like Lehigh's 4-1 in the conference. Holy Cross is 4-1 in the conference, right? So I assume that if Lehigh loses and Holy Cross wins, they jump them, but I don't know.
Well, you would think. I mean, I guess they would jump them at 6-6. Maybe overall record wouldn't matter at that point because if they lose and they win, they have more conference or league wins, and then they win the league and they go. And I'm assuming that that's what it would come down to, but it still doesn't make any sense to me. Whatever.
Right.
Let's just assume that that's what it comes down to.
Yeah. But big shout out to Daniel Porto for the game-winning field goal to keep their season alive, right? So, definitely a tough week for the Crusaders, but 40 points and not a lot of offense is pretty darn impressive.
And of course, going over to the NEC, what can you say about Central Connecticut State? They beat Robert Morris in a wacky finish, which means that if they beat Duquesne on Saturday, they win the NEC and they get an automatic playoff bid.
That's all we can hope for, right? Especially for our coverage and who we got more to keep checking in on. But a really quintessential Brady Olson game, 12 of 34, a touchdown, 2 picks, but they still get it done, right? Elijah Howard, and really, really impressive from the Blue Devils this season, just to keep fighting every single game and putting themselves in this situation.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, again, I can't say this enough, and I said it last night. Kudos to Adam Lechtenberg and the job he's done there. Tremendous job. Another program that played a really good schedule, and that schedule helped them. It helped them immensely. I mean, playing Central Connecticut State and playing Dartmouth and playing UMass, I mean, those games only help you get better. And they certainly played Yale, certainly helped that program get better, and it's going to pay dividends down the road. All right. So we're on to week 13. Not Cincinnati, but week 13 instead. Now, before we make our picks, I do want to remind you that the College Football Preview Show is brought to you by Yolked. Yolked is a safe and effective protein powder with only 47 calories per packet. Tastes like birthday cake. It's delicious. It's a great source of protein. It's made from real egg yolks. It's safe and effective. It's not only safe for veteran athletes or people that have been working out for a long time that are looking to add to their workout, but it's also safe for athletes. Visit yolk.com today for more information on how you can order this great product. And they've been a terrific sponsor for us here the last couple of years, and we want to thank them for their sponsorship, that they really make it so that we can present this content to you guys and give you, some of the best college football content in New England. All right, so let's move along to this weekend's game. Of course, this is the last full weekend of Division I college football action in New England. Hard to believe. Goes by fast. Of course, first matchup we're going to take a look at here, and as always, we're going to make up the lines for the FCS game, so bear with us. But first matchup here, we have 6-4 North Carolina coming to the Heights on Saturday to take on 5-5 Boston College. Tar Heels are favored by -3. The over-under in this one is 56.5. North Carolina's played really well here the past month. On paper, I think if you had asked me 5-6 weeks ago, I would have said, yeah, this is a game BC's going to win. But since Bill O'Brien's not building a monster anymore, that's taking a break for now, all of a sudden now this looks like a game that Boston College is going to have a hard time winning. Tough one to pick. Where are you leaning on this one?
I'm picking the Tar Heels just because of how well they've been playing, right? Taking down a good Wake team. I mean, they took care of business against Florida State. And I think going on the road to the Cavaliers in Virginia and beating them the way they did is what makes me want to take them. And I do think that they showed me something last week, though, the Eagles. So I do think that this can be a close game. Curious about that over, but I'm going to take the Tar Heels.
So if you're taking the Tar Heels, is it safe to say that you're saying that you don't think Boston College is going to qualify for a bowl game? Because Pitt, if North Carolina comes in here and wins, one has to assume Pitt's going to come in here and win.
I think that I had BC around 5-7 to start the season, and when I did my pick. So I feel like I'm kind of, especially thinking, if I think back to then and then now, that does kind of seem the type of team they're in. And sadly for them, that probably still means they could, depending on how many 6-6 teams there are, they could probably still go to the Fenway Bowl again. So I guess there's that. But yeah,
this year I'm making Stone cover it.
Yeah, yeah. Just
He's going to feel our pain, Barry.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And watch, another rainy potentially game. But yeah, I'm going to take the Tar Heels here.
Well, I'm hoping that they do end up at least winning 6 games. And then if they end up in the Fenway Bowl, so be it. At one point, I was hoping that if they win 8 or 9 games, they could potentially end up in the Pinstripe Bowl. That would have been cool.
Yes.
Alas, it did not happen. UConn had a bye last week. They are back in action this week. They traveled to the Carrier Dome in Syracuse to take on the Syracuse Orange. Should still be the Orange men. But Syracuse, this is an interesting line. Of course, they're coming off a win over Cal. Syracuse is favored in this game by 10.5. The over-under is 54.5. 10.5, really? I mean, is Vegas not as bullish on the Huskies as we are?
That's putting, I think, a lot of faith in someone's looking at the teams that UConn has been playing record-wise, team-wise, I think. So,
yes.
I agree. Is my guess. I'm going to take Syracuse, and, I'm even going to take them with those points. I think it could be like a 10-point win exactly, like a 31-20, right? That's going to be my scoreline pick. So give me the Orange.
Okay. I'm going to go with the Orange as well. As much as I'm drinking the UConn Kool-Aid,
right?
I think this is going to be a tough game. I think they can play tough. I think they can hang in there. But I think ultimately UConn pulls it out in the end. Syracuse pulls it out in the end. However, if I were putting money on this, I'm putting the money on the Huskies. I think Syracuse wins this game, but they probably win it by 7, maybe even by 10. But that extra half has me leaning towards UConn in terms of putting money on this one. Next up, we have UMass with Shane Montgomery leading the way. They go down to Georgia to take on Kirby Smart and the Dogs. The Minutemen are 42-point underdogs in this one. The over-under is 55.5. It's very rare that the line and the over-under are almost close. You got to take the Dogs, right? I mean, given where this program is at right now with the turmoil, you got to take the Dogs.
Yeah, I mean, I think you got to take everything there, right? The points, the spread, just and if you lose, right? But definitely the Dogs there.
Yeah, I think Vanilla Ice, aka Carson Beck, will have a big game there. And look, we're going to find out a lot about this UMass program, who stays, who goes, and what team shows up against UConn as well. Stranger things have happened. I mean, if they can keep this game to 21-28 at the half, I'm not saying they're going to win. Let's not be stupid, but they might cover. That's all I'm trying to say. So,
right.
But yeah, I mean, if I were putting money on this game, which I'm not, A, I can't. I'm a Massachusetts resident, but also B, even if I were to put money on this game, and I could, obviously I would put the cash on the Dogs.
Yeah.
All right. Next up, we have we're going to go to the CAA, and this is where we make up lines. So whatever, we're having fun with this. We're previewing the game, so that's our objective here. We're going to start with the annual rivalry game for the Bryce Cowell Musket. UNH at 7-4, visiting Maine at 5-6. The Wildcats are favored in this one by 3.5. The over-under in this one is 48.5.
I am gonna take the Black Bears.
Wow.
I don't know if that's smart. I usually am such a UNH stan, but I thought that UNH was going to be 6-5 this year, or 6-6, somewhere around there. And I think that this record will kind of fall them just short of that outside bid, because I just think that's the type of team they are this year. They're just on the outside, right? So I think this is going to be Maine's year. They've been close the last few years. So yeah, I'm going to take the Black Bears. I think at home, I think there's a lot of momentum. There's a lot of juice for this game. I think it's going to be packed. So I'm gonna just lean. I'm going based on the home team here. If it was in Durham, I would have picked UNH, but I'm just going on who's home.
Yeah, I think that's going to matter in this game. And I think that this Maine team is just different. And I don't want to alienate our Wildcat fans here, but I'm going with Maine as well. I think that they pull off the upset. I think that they're a simple take here as a dog. But I think at the end of the day, this Maine football team has been pretty good all year. And let's not forget, they beat Villanova at home earlier this year. And
Right.
when I look at this game, that game keeps coming back to me. That if you can do that to Nova, you can do this to other people that come to Orono. It's a tough place to play. Of course, it doesn't matter in New Hampshire. They're used to playing there. But I think this is going to be a really close game. I could see it being a 24-17, 28-24 kind of game.
Yeah.
But I'm going to go with the Black Bears here as well to win, to spoil UNH's shot at a playoff bid, and to reclaim the Bryce Cowell musket. All right, next up, we have URI visiting Bryant in the annual Ocean State rivalry game. It's been a long slog, if you will, for Bryant. Of course, URI has plenty to play for here. They are favored in this one by 8.5. That number's a little high. I do think the Rams are going to cover it. I do think the Rams go into Smithfield and take care of business. I'm going with URI in this one.
Same. Yeah, I think they have an emphatic end of the season to what's been, arguably their best ever in some regards, depending on how you want to judge it, based on the modern era of college football. And so yeah, definitely give me the Rams, and the Bulldogs will be licking their wounds trying to figure it out in the offseason. So
yeah, and I just think, again, regardless of who's playing quarterback, I think that this URI offense, it revolves around that running game. And I think that running game is one of the best running games in the CAA. And I think that running game will prove to come in handy this weekend, and what should be a cold, raw weekend. I look for the Rams to lean on that running game and get it done in Smithfield. All right, next up, we're going to go over to the Ivy League. We've got the game, the big one. Yale and Harvard, one of the best rivalry games in college football. You're going to be there for that one. I've got to say, I'm envious. I almost covered that one, but some uncertainty led to me going to the URI game. You're going to be there for that. I know you're pretty excited about covering this one. It's a special game.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough, courtesy of you guys, right, to do it a couple of years ago down at Yale. So it'll be cool to say I've been to both. I'm not sure really how I'm leaning here. I mean, Yale has just been scoring a ton of points, right? 42 against Princeton, 56.
Grant Jordan's been unbelievable.
Yeah. So, and Harvard hasn't really dealt with that too much, partially because their defense is so good and they've shut down those attempts. But I don't know. I would not be shocked if Yale pulls off the upset, but I'm just going to go with the Crimson on the simple basis of they've just been flying this year. Charles DePrima's been playing super well. Being able to run, throw. He caught a touchdown a few weeks ago. So I'm going to go with the Crimson, being at home, clinching it outright. No sharing this year. That's just going to stay in Cambridge.
Yeah, the Crimson are favored in this one by 3.5. The over-under is 50.5. These two teams usually get into the 20s when they play each other on a yearly basis. I'm with you here. I'm going to go Harvard. Yale has had the better of the Crimson here the last years, but I'm going to go with Harvard here. I think they win the Ivy League outright. I think it's a statement win for Coach Orich's team and for the program. They finished the year 9-1. It's hard to believe, and I said this to Kevin last night on the New England Football Show, when I think back to that Brown game, which doesn't seem like it was weeks ago. It seems like it was a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
When I think back to that game, walking out of there, I did a little hit with our good friend Paige Messier, and we talked about, how if you're Brown, you can't still be reliving this one next week. That this has to serve as a springboard to the rest of your season. If you're Harvard, the stench of this loss can't linger, and it didn't. They came back the following week, beat UNH, and they were off and running. And I think it speaks to the job that Andrew Orich has done there. I think it speaks to the experience that the staff that has been there with Tim Murphy, he kept most of the staff. Those guys have done a great job. I'm with you. I think it's going to be a tremendous game. I can see it being a 35-28 kind of game, but I'm going to go with Harvard here as well. All right, next up we have Brown at Dartmouth. Dartmouth is favored in this one by 8.5. It's been really tough sledding for Brown offensively. They haven't been able to run the football most of the year. Passing game has been struggling. We talked about this earlier. Disappointing season for James Perry's squad. I think Dartmouth wins this game and they cover. I think they win it by 10-14. I think they win this game, they cover. And I think that they wait with bated breath to see if Yale can beat Harvard, because if they do, they get a piece of the Ivy League.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Dartmouth as well. I think they're gonna kind of right the ship and finish this strong and give themselves a chance.
Yeah, And again, it's one of those things where, Dartmouth doesn't blow people out. They don't play that kind of game because, again, so much of what they do is predicated on running the football and playing good defense. 8.5 is a tricky number here because I could see this game being a 3 to 7 point game.
Yeah.
Brown's going to show up and they're going to come to play. They want to, those seniors in particular, Jake Wilcox, Mark Mahoney, those guys want to finish their careers on a high note. I covered this game last year at Brown, and I was there when Dartmouth got the news that Yale beat Harvard, which meant that they all three shared a piece of the Ivy League pie. It was fantastic to watch. I mean, there is nothing like Ivy League football. Yeah, I love it. It's one of my favorite things that we cover. It is fantastic. All right. Next up, going over to the FCS independent ranks, we have Merrimack at Fordham. Merrimack is favored in this one by 3.5.
I don't know how to pick this one because Merrimack has been just sliding the last few weeks. I mean, Fordham has been playing better football. They've won two of their last three. I think I'm just going to go Fordham here. I mean, they really took Georgetown to the cleaners and Colgate recently and lost a close one to Bucknell. I don't, Aiden Pereira has just been okay, but they haven't been. He's been throwing a lot of interceptions, right? So, or at least last week he had two, rather. So, I'm going to go with the Rams here. I thought that I would want to pick Merrimack, but they've just been on a bit of a slide.
Yeah, they have. They've lost 2 in a row, lost 6-0 to Robert Morris, and then, of course, they lost the Yankee Conference Championship game to Sacred Heart last week. But I think that they finished the season on a high note here. I'm taking them to beat Fordham. I think this is a big offseason for Coach Giannetti and the Warriors. Program that recruits well. They do well in the portal. They churn out NFL caliber talent. I think he's going to be able to get this program back on solid footing again and take it in the direction he wants to take it in. And I think they go into the offseason with some momentum by beating Fordham and covering that number. All right, next up, we're going to head over to the NEC, where we've got a big one. We've got Central Connecticut State hosting Duquesne. Duquesne is favored in this one by 3.5, but can't count out those Blue Devils, man. What a win last week against Robert Morris. They can win this game. This team has proven to be resilient all year. I'm going to go with the Blue Devils here. I think they get it done. Duquesne's a good football team. They're coming into this game at 8-2. A little Regency bias here on my part, but I'm going to go with the Blue Devils here. I think they win it. I think they win the NEC, and I think they get the automatic playoff bid. I'm taking them as a dog.
I feel bad picking against them because I've really loved them this year. I just worry about how talented Duquesne is. I don't know if they're going to have a response for Darius Parantes from Duquesne, but they have being at home on their side, right? And so there is that. So I'm hoping that the Blue Devils pull it out, but picks wise, I am going to take the Dukes.
And Stonehill closes out their season at Robert Morris. Robert Morris is favored by 10.5. Over under in this one is 45.5. I'm going to go with Robert Morris. It's been a tough year for Eli Gardner's Skyhawks. I think, unfortunately, they were too young in too many key positions, and it proved to be the difference. This is a big offseason for Gardner and his staff. I would expect them to be active in the portal. I would expect them to really hit the ground running and recruiting next Monday. I think that this is a big offseason for this program. They've been able to compete their first 2 years as a D1 program, but this season was a reality check for them. And I think you're going to see some changes at Stonehill, where I think the goal is going to be to get this thing back on track and competing in the NEC.
Yeah, I think it's been tough sledding, but like you said, they're young. They had a lot of turnover, so hit the ground running in the offseason. But yeah, definitely Robert Morris.
All right, and finally we have Holy Cross at Georgetown. The Crusaders are favored in this one by 2.5. Should be a great game. Of course, if Holy Cross wins, Lehigh loses, they win a piece or the Patriot League outright. I mean, we're assuming they'll have the better conference record so that they're winning it outright, but they will need help. Of course, Lehigh beat Holy Cross here a couple of weeks ago, 10-7. I'm going Holy Cross here. I think the Crusaders still have enough veteran experience on that roster. They know what's at stake. Joe Pazanski and company, Jaden Clairvaux, they go down there, they get it done, they pick up the win, and then you cross your fingers and you hope for a Lehigh loss. If that happens, then Holy Cross wins the Patriot League and they go to the playoffs.
Yeah, I'm taking the Crusaders as well and hoping they get some help, right? We want to see as many New England teams get into that postseason play as possible.
All right, final thoughts here before we wrap it up.
I'd like UMass to stop being lead stories for bad reasons. And I am gutted that we're in the final full weekend. It feels like we were just here starting and back in September. So if you have a chance, head out there for one last weekend.
Yeah, this stuff is a labor of love, folks. We love doing this. We have a passion for football. We have a passion for college football, and it's a labor of love. And one thing I will say before we go, when you do this, you develop relationships with people, and that includes coaches and players. And those relationships are genuine. They really are. It's not just, all right, I'm a member of the media. I'm going to take a couple of pictures. I'm going to grab a couple of quotes, and then I'm going to go write a story. It's way more than that. And one of the things when I started this website in 2019 that I wanted to do was I wanted to take my years of coaching experience and my relationships as a coach that I had built coaching small college football and high school football, and I wanted to use them to build this website. And I wanted it to be an authentic website that provided unique football content, but the website, the backbone of this website is relationships. And I know I tweeted out yesterday, or whatever you call it nowadays. I X'd out yesterday. Just a little thought about Coach Brown. And Coach Brown has been somebody that I've admired for a long time. I mean, I've seen him speak at clinics. I followed his career all the way back when he was at Plymouth State to UMass, to UConn, to BC, to Maryland, you name it, and everywhere in between. Michigan, of course, and then, of course, being the head coach at UMass and then coming back and serving a second term as the head coach at UMass. I've always been a fan. When he was at Northeastern, I would go to practices. I was amazed that one man can swear as much as he did. But his players played hard for him. He made Northeastern football relevant. He's a good man. He has a great family, and he's a hell of a football coach. And if he decides he wants to coach next season, I don't think he's going to have a shortage of opportunities. And he's a guy that's certainly still young enough and healthy enough and passionate enough that he can make a difference for a program next season, either as a coordinator or in any kind of role on the defensive side of the ball. So, Coach Brown, I want to say thank you for everything that you've done for us. You've been a proponent of our website. You've supported us. You've been generous with your time, whether it be at clinics, coming on with us. We greatly appreciate you, my friend, and we can't wait to see what's next for you. And we can't wait to see what's next for the UMass football program because, while we have strong opinions, ultimately we want our programs in this region, the programs we cover, we take great pride in them being successful because it makes covering them even more special than it already is and more fun. So we can't wait to see what's next for UMass. We're going to be rooting for the Minutemen as long as we're in business. And, we hope that they hire a candidate that they think is best suited to coach this team moving forward, and that coach takes it to the next level and that the program has success. But that'll do it for this week's episode of the College Football Preview Show. We'll be back with you one more time next week. For Ryan Barry, I'm John Serenitas. Till next week. Peace.